take over, please. A big round of applause to Molly.
Thank you, Madan, and thank you everyone for making it for this session today. It's been a long time, and we are very happy to have you all with us. Our second session is on research frontiers in the knowledge economy, and to enlighten us on this is Professor Som Prakash Bandyopadhyaya from IIM Calcutta, Research Director of Social Informatics Research Group, and we have Professor M.H. Bala Subramania from the Indian Institute of Science. Let me tell you a little, welcome to both Professor Som Prakash and Professor Bala. Let me guide you a little into what they are actually doing. Professor Som Prakash Bandyopadhyaya is the Research Director of Social Informatics Research Group at the Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata. He was earlier Principal Consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Assistant Professor at IIT Mumbai. His forthcoming book is Social Knowledge Management for Rural Empowerment. Welcome to Professor Som Prakash.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my other eminent guest is Professor M.H. Bala Subramania. He is a senior professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He's an economist specializing in industrial economics. He has published books on entrepreneurship, SMEs, and technology business incubation. Two of his recent works, which are published as monographs by De Gruyter, Berlin, Germany, which are going to be coming out in January of 2021. The first one is entitled as Entrepreneurial Ecosystems for Tech Startups in India, Evolution, Structure and Role. And the second one is titled as Technology Business Incubators in India, Structure, Role and Performance. In addition, he has also completed a work on global value chains of multinational companies and Indian SMEs. Why to promote linkages, how, which is under review for an international journal. So he will also give us his views on the various industry institute interaction for innovations and betterment of Indian economy. We welcome you, Professor Bala. So let me start the session first with Professor Som. So could you throw some light on the work that you have been doing?
Yeah, actually, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. We work on social informatics research group at IIM Calcutta. So, IIM Calcutta, I am in management information systems. Okay, and as you all know, this management information system and knowledge management is just a part of it. Essentially, working on information system technology for organizational benefit. So, in our social informatics research group, we try to see the implications of knowledge of information system and technology for social benefit. And here the word social has two implications. By information technology and information system, we focus mostly or mainly on the social technology. But social technology is an umbrella term used to capture the internet-enabled entire environment, the tools, platforms, and the communication technologies. Okay, which involves Web 2.0, Mobile 2.0, and essentially social media and other social applications. So these are essentially the domain of social technology and socially enabled applications. And we look into the application of social technologies for social benefit. Okay, and our recent book is, which is published in 1st September, is on rural empowerment. So how social knowledge management using social technology can bring rural empowerment by bridging the rural-urban knowledge divide. So this I'll just explain, but maybe Professor Bala can give an introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Som. Could I have Professor Bala?
Yeah, good evening. It's my pleasure to join you. And let me briefly explain what I have been doing. I am, as already I have been introduced as an economist, and my focus is primarily on industrial economics. and I'm completing my 25th year of service in the IASC. For about almost 1.5 decades, my focus of research was on small and medium enterprises. I try to understand the various dimensions of SMEs in terms of their R&D and innovations, in terms of their energy intensity and energy efficiency, in terms of how technological innovations contribute to the gradual growth of SMEs. Such issues I focused for about almost till 2000. In 2010, till 2010 actually. So in 2010, I had been to the US on a Fulbright scholarship, which enabled me to get exposure to startups, their ecosystem, environment, everything. So after coming back from the US, actually, I started working on tech startups and their ecosystems. I guided a couple of students for their dissertations. In fact, the first PhD dissertation that I guided, particularly in the context of tech startups, was with respect to venture capital fund operations. So the student who worked on this particular problem tried to understand how do venture capitalists decide on which venture to invest and which venture not to invest, and how long the association with the venture should continue, what should be the depth of involvement, and what should be the mode of exit. Now, this thesis, she got actually awarded the PhD in 2015 or 2016 or so. But this year, the thesis has been published by Cambridge University Press as a book under the title, The Economics of Venture Capital Firm Operations in India. Another student worked on internet startups in India. How do they graduate? How do they stabilize? And how do they grow? 3 phases of life cycle of tech internet startups he studied. Even his thesis was published by Cambridge University Press, India in 2019, last year. Now, thereafter, I carried out 2 research projects funded by the Department of Science and Technology. The first one is to explore and understand the entrepreneurial ecosystems that have emerged in India, particularly with a focus on Bangalore and Hyderabad. All of you would know that Bangalore is the leading tech startup hub, not only in India, but globally also. And Hyderabad is a fast-growing tech startup hub. That's why I try to understand what kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem has emerged over a period of time in these 2 cities. What is the structure of the ecosystem? What are the major components of this ecosystem? And what role do they play over the life cycle stages of tech startups? It is the so that project report now has been converted into a manuscript, and Dave Gruita is publishing it on 1st January 2021. The second one, primarily because the proposal came from the DST and we gave life to it, and we try to understand the structure and operations of technology business incubators in India. When we say technology business incubators, the definition is pretty broad to comprise accelerators, business incubators, and co-working spaces. How these 3 actually help in the ecosystem to nurture tech startups, and what kind of R&D contributions do they emerge? What are the dimensions of these R&D contributions that have emerged from these TBIs? That's what we have studied. Now, the focus of this project covered Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, 3 South Indian tech startup hubs. So in the process, we got opportunity to interact with various institutions, because business incubators are primarily institution-based. That made us to visit many of these institutes. Of course, in Bangalore, we visited CCAM of NCPS and IIIT Bangalore, and in Hyderabad, IIIT Hyderabad, ISB, T-Hub, and such locations. And in Chennai, primarily it was IIT Madras. So this project report also is converted into a manuscript, and it will be published on 1st January by Dave Gruita. Apart from that, briefly, let me also make reference to the work that I have completed, which is under review, is with respect to the global value chains of multinational corporations. Most of you would know that the global trade is increasingly dominated by the global value chains of multinational corporations. Therefore, any economy, particularly developing economies, unless and until they penetrate these global value chains, they will not be able to make a big impact on the global trade scenario. And in the Indian context, small and medium enterprises have been at the forefront of India's internationalization strategy. Internationalization through exports. In fact, according to the latest data, about 50% of India's exports was contributed by small and medium enterprises. But the paradox is that despite almost 50% of the Indian exports emerging from SMEs, hardly 1% of the SMEs in the country is internationalized, in the sense they are exporting. And many of them are intermittent exporters and not continuous exporters. So it is in this context I try to understand what is primarily responsible for this particular paradox. On the one hand, they are the major contributors, but on the other hand, a minuscule SME sector has penetrated the international market. So I try to understand why this scenario exists and how to counter this so that more and more small and medium enterprises will be able to penetrate the global market and reach the global value chains. I think I'll stop at this point. I'll elaborate it later.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Som. And yes, to Professor Som, what are the emerging implications of your work in the context of the pandemic now? What exactly is happening?
Actually, before that, I just want to explain the social knowledge management a little bit, and I want to share it, and then we can go into that, because actually we are working in different villages and using the social technologies, so to say, and we'll explain that. And it will be easier for us then to understand that how this social knowledge management can help to integrate the rural community over the internet, through internet. Okay, so just can I share? Yeah, I'll just share my presentation.
Yeah, I've done multiple sharing, so you should be able to.
Sure. Just 1 minute. Yeah, can you see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. So essentially, our book is talking about social knowledge management for rural empowerment and bridging the knowledge divide using social technology. And in the social informatics research group, what we are working is social inclusion through digital inclusion through socio-digital innovation, where this word socio-digital or socio-technical is very important concept, because people are working on social subsystem for rural empowerment, especially the NGOs, and there are a lot of other governmental effort to work on technology to penetrate or to reach the rural people and to empower them. But essentially, we are trying to think the interaction of the social subsystem with the technical subsystem, and that's basically the socio-digital or socio-technical interaction. In the perspective of other external influencers, which are essentially their social conditions, economic conditions, the psychological conditions, in that perspective. Okay? So when we talk about rural empowerment using social technologies, we have to think in terms of the interaction between the social subsystem and the technical subsystem. It's not just the social technology which is talking about the rural empowerment. And the rural empowerment we are seeing from a knowledge theoretic perspective. That's why we are essentially trying to call it a social knowledge management. But before that, let's see the basic reasons, or the one of the fundamental reasons for rural disempowerment. Okay, so we treat that as rural-urban knowledge divide. So if we see that we all know that knowledge is an asset indispensable for human growth, and knowledge is a social resource, okay, and like any other social resource, its uneven distribution causes a knowledge divide, and the knowledge transaction is also a social process. And if we look into the knowledge divide, we can break it in terms of access divide, capability divide, and opportunity divide. Access divide is, of course, the lack of access to the knowledge resource, which essentially the rural community is suffering from. But apart from that, there is a notion of capability divide, because even if you have access to knowledge, you have to have a proper capability to nurture or to absorb that particular knowledge, and you need that support structure, the teacher, mentor, peer group, socioeconomic environment, to make yourself capable of, or knowledge capable in that sense, to process the knowledge resource. Okay. So, and third is, even if you have access, even if you have capability, you have to have a proper linkage to the opportunity structure where you can use your knowledge or use your capability. So, opportunity divide is the inability to find proper opportunities for the individual to exploit the knowledge capability. Okay, so we view empowerment in terms of bridging these three divides from a knowledge theoretic perspective, and we want to create a digital space which can actually bridge the access divide, capability divide, and opportunity divide. And that's where we are essentially talking about the concept of social knowledge management. Okay, so we know that knowledge management is long been used in organizational environment for organizational performance improvement. But there is no explicit proposal for knowledge management outside the boundary of structured organization. So in our book, actually, we try to develop and empirically validate a social knowledge management framework which would help mobilize knowledge resource to bridge rural-urban knowledge divide, use digital connections and social collaboration. Here comes the notion of the use of social technology, which essentially helps us to build that particular framework which enables us to make digital connections and social collaboration. Okay. And eventually that rural empowerment. So essentially, social knowledge management is a digital space where we essentially enabling the marginalized rural community members to connect and collaborate using social technology. And we need that to essentially bridge the access, capability, and opportunity divide. And how we do this? We do this by forming different virtual communities. So as we can see here, so if we look at the formal definition of social knowledge management, we can see that social knowledge management in our context is a framework of knowledge creation, assimilation, and dissemination through digital connection and social collaboration, okay, using social technology and opportunity to interact and collaborate with each other. That's essentially the fundamental thing. Okay? So we have three kind of community we try to develop, and we have done different empirical study in several rural areas. One is essentially the community of practice, where we try to develop a community for linking them to quality teaching, advisory service, and other kind of stuff by connecting them with urban experts, local experts, and local community members. And then essentially comes, this is essentially for the capability, bridging the capability divide. As I said, that knowledge resource is there, but you have to make the rural people capable of absorbing that knowledge. And here is one thing is very important, is that when we talk about rural-urban knowledge divide, it's not that there is only knowledge is concentrated in urban area and rural has no knowledge. Essentially, the rural knowledge also should be mobilized because they have a lot of knowledges and it's a both-way interaction. That's essentially the focal point. So that's why we are focusing here mostly on kind of co-creation, okay, using the exchange of knowledge between the rural entity and the urban entity. And community of practice is essentially doing that, building the capability, okay. And then the community of purpose is basically bridging the opportunity divide, essentially the market linkages and other forms where the rural community, we work on rural artisans, non-farm workers, so they can exploit the market opportunity, global market opportunity, and then to the linking them to the governance. Okay, so the government, community members, NGO. So this is essentially the community of circumstances. So these three kinds of community are getting created. And this particular model we have derived from the famous SCCI model of Nonaka and Takuechi. You know that they have explained the knowledge transaction and knowledge exchange. So they have explained in terms of externalization, combination, internalization, and socialization. Okay. So externalization is from individual to group. So when my tacit knowledge is explicitly expressed in the form of book or documents or whatever, so that is essentially externalization of knowledge in the form of tacit knowledge to the explicit knowledge. And then is combination, when you combine explicit knowledges. Okay, so then groups are essentially formed. The explicit knowledge is basically becomes the organization knowledge. And when I internalize the explicit knowledge, that means from organizational knowledge depository, when it comes to individuals, that becomes internalization. And most important part is the tacit knowledge to tacit knowledge exchange, which is basically the socializing. So social technology gives us the opportunity for this socialization because it prompts us to communicate with individuals in a more informal platform. And this is essentially following the concept of BA as proposed by Nonaka on socialization. So at that basically field of space, which we are calling community of purpose or community of practice. Okay? So essentially, I'll just give you one example of our work, which we are actually doing it. Just one moment. I have to share with. So, this is an experiment we have done with the rural community, with the self-help groups, and where we have implemented the particular notion of managing the rural knowledge for their life and livelihood. Spoken English training, which now we have created a platform called Encode, which essentially links different agencies because they are essentially the producer of handicrafts regions. So different agencies are networked in the form of we call it community of purpose, so that they can get connected to the urban opportunity structure, the urban market, and then entire supply chain is getting ordered through the interaction of different agents like raw material producer, the logistics supporter, the buyer, the funder. All these things form a network which is using the digital platforms for the info. Essentially the kind of thing, and what we did is essentially using the WhatsApp communication. We have made them talk to, as I said, themselves. They shared their designs. They're interacting with the urban designers and urban say traders or other things, etc. Okay, so this is essentially the kind of issues, and project by Department of Science and Technology. So with Birbhum Artisans, we created a portal for them on their the different sarees and other handicrafts product which they're making, and using their the kind of smartphone capability, which is basically we are using that, and then remotely we are trying to address the issue of communicating with them. So what we have done is essentially we have created a particular portal on this. Just one moment, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Som. I think that is
Sure, we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
we'll
very interesting to know about social knowledge management taken at a very different level, because most of the time we are looking only at an academic institution or at corporate level, and we have not really touched upon the rural areas. And I think that's fantastic work that Professor is doing. To take a little further with Professor Bala, you were speaking about your technology, about the book on technology business incubators. What are the challenges that they are facing?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay. See, you have made me to focus on the second book. Now, what is relevant is also my first book, because there what we have done is we try to define an ideal ecosystem, ideal entrepreneurial ecosystem for tech startups in a country like India. And then we describe the prevailing ecosystems in Bangalore and Hyderabad. And then we ascertain the gap. Now, all these things are done based on Delphi method. We identified about 50 plus experts in Bangalore and almost 40 experts in Hyderabad belonging to different stakeholder systems of the ecosystem based on review of literature. So the major stakeholders involve government representatives, multinationals and large domestic enterprise executives, educational institution professors who are primarily involved in undertaking innovations and commercializing it. And these three actually formed what is called the triple helix base for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Now, subsequently, what we defined the structure is in terms of the 5 major indispensable components, what we call sources of finance, market support, human resources, mentorship, which included both business and technology mentors, and support system in the form of accelerators, incubators, and co-working spaces. These 5 form the indispensable components of the entrepreneurial ecosystem structure. Now, in addition, there are 2 supplementary components. One is culture and one is media. They are supplementary because they're not absolutely essential. But if an ecosystem has to thrive, there has to be a strong triple helix base in the form of government, industry, and academia. And there has to be constant interactions between the three. Because it is the interaction between the three which actually generates sources of finance, market support, human resources, mentorship, and even support system in the form of ABC, that is accelerators, business incubators, and co-working spaces. Now, when we analyze, and based on the interaction, 4-stage interactions that we had with the Delphi experts, we could determine or ascertain the gap that exists between the prevailing ecosystems and the ideal ecosystem that is feasible in the Indian context. Now, these gaps primarily pertain to the role of educational institutions as far as triple helix base is concerned, and inadequate size of the market as far as the 5 indispensable components are concerned, and it is culture, that is the culture that is prevalent in the 2 cities. So the gaps are predominantly identified with respect to these 3 factors. Precisely for the same reason, when we studied technology business incubators, focusing on the 3 cities, we felt that the TBIs broadly covering ABCs, they are relatively young, and a majority of them are under-occupied. In the sense, hardly any incubator which was actually overflowing in terms of occupants. In fact, some of the TBIs accounted for hardly 50% of the space that they have created. Now, given the occupants, many of them were not able to graduate themselves out of these support systems. There is various reasons for that. So overall, the kind of R&D contribution that was supposed to emerge from these TBIs through their tech startups was found out to be minimal. That was the major finding. Now, but what enabled us to understand is to focus more on the incubation system that is prevalent in IIT Madras. Now, I'm referring to the IIT Madras ecosystem because the Startup India policy announced by the Government of India proposed to replicate research park model of IIT Madras in about 6 IITs and IIS. But please note, this proposal has not taken off at all. And when we visited the research park of IIT Madras and interacted with the professors and other stakeholders of the research park, we understood that research park is not a standalone entity. It is ably supported by what is called pre-incubation cell, Nirman, and a sandbox called C5, the Center for Innovation. Now, sandbox is primarily meant for students. That is C5, or Center for Innovation. And this has emerged primarily because the institute authorities over a period of time observed that at any point of time, about 300 to 400 student clubs were operating out of their respective hostels for ideation. So it is this observation made the institute authorities to create a formal platform in the form of C5. So where the students were explicitly encouraged for ideation and even to work towards what is called proof of concept. And those who have successfully proved their proof of concept were encouraged to enter the pre-incubation cell. The pre-incubation cell Nirman actually comprised not only the projects emerged from the students, but also professors who have worked on their innovation commercialization. So on an average, about 10% of these 300 to 400 clubs of C5 graduated to Nirman. That is about 30 to 40. And about 10% of these 30 to 40 projects which have entered Nirman ultimately entered the research park-based incubators. It is that kind of a system which actually enabled, among others, the research park to generate more than 150 tech startups. Some of them could scale up subsequently. But that kind of a support system is lacking in any other TBAs that we have observed. However, CCAM in Bangalore, which is actually a platform for biotech startup generation, is doing a great work, primarily because it has been very strongly supported by the Ministry of, I think it is
ITBT.
ITBT has strongly supported. Now, in the Hyderabad context, IIIT Hyderabad and ETH both are adjacent to each other virtually. But IIIT Hyderabad has a long history. They again have generated more than 100 tech startups. That environment is entirely different. So, but these three we found very promising environments. But the structure which impressed me the most is that of IIT Madras. Now, I will stop.
Yeah, thank you.
But I'll add one point. Now, you made reference to the current global pandemic.
Yes.
In fact, what we have observed is recently, global pandemic has actually given a fillip support to service-based startups more than product-based startups. So in this context, we must remember that there are about 31 unicorns in the country. Now, all these unicorns are service-based startups and not product-based startups. Last point, one of my students is currently focusing exclusively on startup failure in the country. What he has observed, he's almost at the fag end of his data collection. What he has observed is majority of those failed startups belong to the product category. So that means Indian ecosystem, irrespective of where the startups are nurtured, it is more a fertile ground for service-based startups than product-based startups. I'll stop it there.
Yeah, just to continue there, the startup incubators that we have in our educational institutions, what we notice again there also, it is more of tech-based rather than product-based. And I'm from a small town in Bangalore. And here also we notice that the incubators and the tech parks are not doing so well as what you said in Chennai or Bangalore or Hyderabad.
Yes.
So does the government need to start still focusing in these areas?
See, right now government is simply pumping money into these TBIs and they're creating physical space. But what is important, more important is the soft infrastructure.
Correct.
Particularly, there has to be a strong base of mentorship. A city like Bangalore, Hyderabad and Chennai, where a significant number of executives, they rather work between Silicon Valley and these three cities, they provide a strong support of mentorship and a strong base of MNCs. Their executives, many of them quit their jobs, they become mentors, they become either venture capitalists or angel investors. So they either become, or some of them quit and start their own co-working space. Some of them quit and start their own incubators. So that kind of a fertile environment is largely absent in small cities like Mangalore, Coimbatore, or Madurai, or Salem, Hubli, for example.
Yes.
Hubli, see, we studied the ecosystem in Hubli. Hubli, KL Technological University has put in a lot of efforts to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem within the city. But it has hardly made any kind of an impact on the ecosystem growth because large industries virtually absent. And government, regional governments focus on Hubli is limited. So I would say, unless and until you have a triple helix base and these 5 essential components, it is very difficult even for a TBI to make a mark. Because I will tell you, I have visited even some other cities, including Coimbatore and Interact. It is not enough if you create a physical space and put some equipment and put in a TBI manager and supporting staff. They need skills to really enable ideation, take it to POC, take it to prototype development, take it to minimum viable product, and enable product launching by identifying early product market. So unless and until that kind of a system is put in place, TBIs or co-working space or accelerators, of course, supported by the corporate sector, so they are fairly in a better position. Whereas TBIs, which are mostly institution-based, are unlikely to make an impact in terms of startup generation.
Yes. So that's a huge gap, and I think that's a big challenge also that the government needs to really start doing more of ideation and more of infrastructure in these areas, because there's a lot of people who have moved to cities and they're moving back and would love to do well, it's startups in these towns, but don't have the facilities for it. Yeah. Professor Song, I was just what is the emerging implications of your work in the context of the current pandemic?
Yeah, actually, in the context of startup, I am also co-founder, mentor of a social knowledge management startup, which is called Next Connect. So there, what we are trying in this pandemic scenario to mobilize the knowledge resource remotely to the rural people. In the sense that definitely the smartphone is a constraint, so they have to have a smartphone. But once they have a smartphone, a lot of people in the village, they have smartphone. Okay, maybe the children, their father or mother, and in our case, actually, why we are mobilizing these rural artisans and their children through remote education, remote handholding, and remotely connecting them to the urban market. So that becomes a kind of mandate during the pandemic. And you see, we have created a platform where we are remotely collecting their profile, the profile of their product and their portfolio and about themselves. Then we are putting them in the website. They take their own video. So essentially, everything is user generated.
Yeah.
And now in the platform, we are making those things available to the urban market, or say, sense of global market. And then we are also remotely training them. So you see, it's like using the Zoom platform. So we train them how to use Zoom and how to make this kind of environment, and then we can use the training kind of stuff. So this pandemic is essentially kind of forcing them to be digitally literate in that sense. Okay? So it's as
Pandemic has forced everyone to go to
yeah. So
need a world, a global village today.
exactly.
I think
So
the fact that
thing
we
is
have
that mobile smartphone cost is a problem, but essentially, if we can improve their livelihood by exposing them to the global market, then if they can earn by doing that, then they can afford to buy smartphone in that sense.
yeah, to the
So that is essentially kind of thing is that they're, as I said, that they're forced to become a part of digital world. So and people who are not having smartphone, that's a problem. So they need to buy thing which is not very easy.
lot of challenges, lot of challenges.
Yeah.
So we have 10 more minutes before we wrap.
Sure.
Before that, I would like you to both Professors Bala and Professor So to give me 3 success factors for better partnership between academia and the corporates for innovation. I mean, whoever wants can take it first, because there's a major disconnect I feel still.
Yeah.
As an academia, we still look at the industry and we like to look at each industry, each corporate, and then try to see what is it general, what is it common. We study and we create a theory behind it. But somewhere that data doesn't seem to be coming. And so could you just, both of you give us 3 success factors?
I would say industry institute interaction as far as IITs, IIMs, and to some extent even NITs are concerned, there exists industry institute interaction. The level might vary from one to the other. But what is largely absent is engineering institutions which are located in tier 2, tier 3 cities. There they lack. So I have suggested in one of my research works, that is to promote industry institute interaction. Now that can be done this way. Now undergrad students and postgraduate students, they have to do project work, as part of their engineering program. Now, this project work, they must link it to industry. If you see majority of the engineering institutions in the country, they are located in tier 2 and tier 3 cities where there's a huge concentration of small and medium enterprises as well.
Yes.
Now, majority of the small and medium enterprises, they face technical issues. They face technical problems. In a city like Bangalore, say if you look at Pune Industrial Estate, it is very well linked with Institute of Science because the distance is very short and they're always welcome in the institute. So many of them have linked their enterprises with different departments. And I also give one further example. There's a Center for Electronic Design and Technology, which is renamed as Department for Electronic Systems and Engineering. Now, in this particular department, there's a postgraduate program which is very well known in the country, and they take about 35 to 40 students for their PG program. Now, as part of the project work of this PG program, the department makes the student to go and pick a live problem year after year. So the student is forced to go to industry, pick a live problem, formulate it, give an academic touch to it, and then solve that problem and make a presentation in the department. So they do not want a theoretical problem. They lay emphasis on practical problems. Now it is that kind of an emphasis that actually has to emerge in all the engineering institutions for their graduate programs and postgraduate programs. That is one way. Suppose you impose that. Now when you do that, both student and the guide will be forced to interact with the industry, understand the industry's problems and provide a solution. Now for SMEs, it means getting cost-effective solutions from the academy. And as of now, if you see, industry has no confidence in the deliverability of, say, academic faculty in engineering institutions. So somehow we have to encourage this way and see that the gap is bridged. Now, if you do that, even if 10 to 15% of these efforts, if these efforts are successful to the extent of, let us say, 10 to 15%, that will gradually promote industry-institute interaction like it prevails elsewhere in the developed world.
Thank you. And your views, Professor Som?
Yeah, I fully agree with Professor Bala, and I want to add one more point. Essentially, so IMC, Calcutta Innovation Park, which is essentially nurturing entrepreneurship, is focusing on social entrepreneurship. Okay, so social entrepreneurship is a very important point where students, of course, they should go to the industrial problem or problem in business organization and all. But there are problems and which using technology one can solve very efficiently and elegantly. That's a problem in the rural area, the problem of the underprivileged. So social entrepreneurship is essentially the entrepreneurship. It could be for profit, it could be not for profit, doesn't matter. But essentially dealing with social problems and solving social problems. So that kind of sensitization is very important among the student, and they definitely, I fully agree with Professor Bala, they should work on realistic problems, either in industry or in social sector or wherever. Okay, and whatever projects they do, I get a lot of interns who are actually interested in this kind of project on social development and other things. So if we can, as faculty members, if we can sensitize them to work on different real life practical problems, I think that's better. And if we can do that, that's good for the country and good for us also, because we can get newer research areas to explore and to work further.
Yeah, thank you. So one last question I would like to ask before our time gets over. I want a one-line comment on what you would like to make for industry and academia to work together. One last comment, one last single line.
You see, there is no easy solution for this. I'm telling you very clearly. See, because industry will not come to academia unless and until you create confidence in them. I suggested SMEs because SMEs can be provided virtually free solutions. A large industry will not provide consultancy to an institution unless and until they have the confidence in the deliverability of the faculty members whom they approach. So that's the easy solution. That is why I suggested the project model. Suppose they get solutions in the form of projects, confidence can gradually emerge and gap can be bridged.
Yeah. Professor Som?
Yeah, actually, as I focus mostly on the improvement of social sectors, and usually we give all the responsibility to government and NGOs. Okay, so that's why I mentioned about social entrepreneurship. So definitely there has to be entrepreneurs who are actually working for the social problem solving. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why the industry, or in fact, these days, a lot of industries are also coming up, not exactly through CSR, but also through mainstream mechanism to work on social problem, because that's profitable. Because essentially, if you can make it sustainable, then it is profitable to solve social problem. It's not that it's not profitable always in
Yeah.
that sense. So that's why actually people have to focus on social problem, and without relying or without giving all the blames on government and all this kind of stuff, we have to come forward to solve these social problems through our students. Okay.
Yeah, I think Corey from Bangkok has a question. Would a unifying definition of knowledge management assist with the merger of academic and the private sector? I know in the US this has been the challenge. Would one of you like to take that question, please?
Oh, can you come again?
Would a unifying definition of knowledge management assist with the merger of academic and the private sector?
Well, what perhaps can be done is now corporate sector, even in the Indian context, particularly in the field of business analytics, they are more than willing to join the academic institution to teach the program. In some institutions, they even define the syllabus. Perhaps that kind of an approach can actually help knowledge generation, knowledge management for the betterment of the country.
Yeah. So basically, industry coming forward with academics,
Yes.
draw up a syllabus and
Yes.
getting the required training from the industry to the academic.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that's the solution. With that, thank you, Professor Bala and Professor Som, for very interesting and very different viewpoints on knowledge management and, of course, the entrepreneurial ecosystems. Thank you very much, and over to you, Madan, for the wrap up.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Professor Som. Thanks, Professor Bala. I'll be publishing reviews of your books once they come out. I look forward to some very interesting reads. You've done huge amount of research in this space, and I think it's time for us, all of us, to read more about your hard work and get benefits from your insights. So I shall share links on LinkedIn to these book reviews when they come. Big thanks to all the attendees who've joined us from Israel, from Thailand, from South Africa, and also across India. I know there's Bangalore, Delhi, etc. on this, and Bombay on this link. Thank you all so much. Biggest thanks, of course, to Molly for hosting us, for taking a big lead in bringing the Bangalore knowledge management community online. We normally used to meet physically for the last, I guess, 15, 20 years. But due to this new normal, we all have to meet online. And thank you, Molly, for bringing us into this new era. So before we wrap up, I would just like to invite anybody who wants to give suggestions for next time's topics. Maybe next month on the 3rd Wednesday, we will meet again. So if there are topics that you would like to discuss and suggest, please type them. We will all discuss within our group and come up with topics and speakers for next week. So once again, thank you all. Any comments?
Don't forget the group photo. Don't forget the group photo.
A group photo. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Rudy, for reminding us again. This is the informal but very important part of this K community, which is requesting everyone to put on their videos so we can take a group photo.
Put on your best smile.
Yeah, put on your best smile. Rudy will give us the count for 1, 2, 3. That time everyone smiles. So,
Rudy, you have only one screen now.
Hi, Corey. How are you?
Sri
Rajeshwari, and Jayanta. And Corey, we want to see you.
Yeah, we want to see you. Just for a photo. Don't worry. Don't be shy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. Now everyone just look at the camera, smile. Okay. 1 second. I'll take one more photo. Just let me copy and paste that.
Yeah.
1 second. At the same time, I'd like to thank both the professors, fabulous insights. Look at the camera and smile once more with your best smile. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, Rudy, for reminding us
Thanks,
about this
Rudy.
very important ritual.
Yeah.
Anybody want to say something very quickly? Sri Harsha, you've been listening. Any quick?
Thanks for giving the opportunity to unmute ourselves and even open the video. Many of my colleagues, I'm seeing them after 6 or 5 months.
Oh, okay. Thanks to us, you can see them.
Thanks, Bala. Thank you so for wonderful insights, Bala. I think the Indian startups, especially in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, the points that you have made are really insightful. I think government should take a note of all the academics as well as the industry problems and the relationship between these two. And if they could help them in nurturing, that would be a real.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Paras, want to say something?
Thanks.
We've got 2 minutes
And
left.
let's be connected, professors, because there's a lot of work that we can sit and do together.
Sure.
Community, we have Bangalore K Community, we have the CII core team in knowledge management, as well as we have knowledge management global network. We all work for promotion of knowledge management.
Sure.
Knowledge management on new level.
Let's take a quick comment from Paras. Paras, you want to say
Paras,
something?
yeah, there, long time.
Yeah. Great insights. I mean, I would love to get these sessions more, more people around. I mean, this time I'm sure, we had good UI folks, so hope to see more of other organizations getting more in competitive intelligence coming onto this platform. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks. How about you, Tony? You want to add something? You're on mute. We can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is my first meeting, and I really liked the exchange of the ideas. So I really appreciate that, and I hope to join more.
Please do.
Yeah, we'll be having more online ones in future.
Yeah, we will. And Randir, I know you have a special note to mention today. Go on. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Now to Professor MHB, because I'm seeing him after a long time.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good, Professor. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, I work a lot on MSM in knowledge management. So
Okay.
I was asking Dr. Molly for your connect. I'll reach out to you
Right.
and talk to you on this.
Okay. Very nice to see you after a long time.
Yeah, we'll connect you. Don't worry.
Madan, we have Refilo and Corey also.
Sure. Corey, you want to say something? You've asked some very good questions. Corey, this is your time to say 1 or 2 words quickly before we sign off. Corey or Shubha? Corey, yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, you guys have a great community going there. And in fact, I started up a community in Austin, Texas here recently. I go to Bangkok University, but I actually live in the US. So before we get a little bit misconstrued here, I do attend Bangkok University, but I live in the US, live in Texas and everything. Been back, left Korea about a year ago. So, I guess it'd be jet setter going to school overseas and living elsewhere. But no, you guys have a great community going, and keep it up. And hopefully my community in Austin flourishes like your guys have.
Yeah, let us know when you meet. Some of us will come and join you also. Thanks, Corey.
Yes.
Wade, you want to say something?
So you can chalk it up that we had a US participant also.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely. 5 countries.
US by way of Thailand, yeah. Wade?
Yeah, so Madan, I think we are calling it Bangalore K Community. I think we are in a virtual mode. We should call it a global K community or just a K community.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks. Rudy, you want to add something quickly? I guess Rudy is gone. Okay. Anybody else? Did I leave out?
Shubha's got something to say?
Refilo, Sagar, Jayanta, Shubha. Otherwise, I guess it's dinner time now. Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Oh, Refilo is there. Yes, Refilo, you have the last word.
Yes. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks.
This was a great session. I'm quite excited, and in future, when you invite us again, I will extend the invitation to other South Africans. We normally like to be part of the
Definitely.
global community because there's a lot for us to learn. And maybe one day we'll also